Hello, everyone. I'm just the setup we have for the evening today is I'm going to do a brief introduction of what we're doing, why we're here, and who's involved. Then I'm going to hand over to Joriam and over to the rest. So very briefly, this World Building Academy thing that we're all doing, what is it? So the simplest way of putting it is it's imagining alternative worlds that could be, and then building the economics that make them possible. So the World Building Academy is a platform where a lot of people come together and imagine completely alternative worlds. There's the storytelling part, which some of us are involved in, and we imagine these worlds, and then the economists and the scientists and others come in and we look at, okay, is this feasible? Could this be built this way or that way? Because science fiction is a powerful way for us to imagine alternative futures when we're stuck. And but the thinking, the economic thinking behind is not always necessarily very rigorous. So this is what the World Building Academy hopes to contribute. And so why are we doing this right now? Well, because we're stuck. We have to make this transition to a different future. We're in this place between what's no more and what's not yet. Who are we going to be in this future? What's it going to look like? How will it work? How will it be plausible? How will we get there from where we are? And this is a way we think that we can step out of our own limitations as individuals, as collectives, thinking about where we could be. And who is organizing this? Well, Edgeryders, and it's an online, offline community that interacts through an open online platform. It's also a not-for-profit company that runs a research institute and does on-location experiments based on what comes out of our online conversations and insights. There's Fondazione Comunità di Messina, about whom you can, the work of whom you could read about on the platform. I think we can share a link with you guys before we leave. Fascinating case study of an alien economy that already exists, and it's real. There is Blivande, which is a creative space in Stockholm, very interesting. Also, you can read about it on the community platform. And who is supporting it? There's EIT Climate-KIC is providing funding, as well as Globus fund at Nordisk Kulturfund. People who are involved, the team, who you will get to know better throughout this evening, is Alberto Cottica, who founded this initiative and is one of my fellow co-founders of Edgeryders. There's Joriam, who's based in Sri Lanka and has been setting some of the building the basic infrastructure for this world. And Joriam, who's been working alongside Joriam also in building the foundations for this platform or these worlds. There's Huye, and there's Maria and myself. So I'm going to hand over to Joriam.
And Ivan and Bojan as well.
Oh, and where are you guys? I can't see you.
Yeah, on the screen.
There we go. Ivan and Bojan.
We are here.
Yeah, it's a collective and it's growing. So welcome everybody. And Judenthea, over to you.
All right, fantastic. Here's my mic clear. Fantastic. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much, Nadia. My name is Yudanjay Vijayaratne. You can call me Yuda. I know the name is quite long. Visa forms are rather interesting. So I am, as Nadia said, I am a science fiction writer. I live in Sri Lanka. So the whole point of being like a writer is I make up lies and I put them down on paper and people actually pay me for it. So this is actually a fantastic thing. When I'm not in the business of professionally lying to people, I work in policy. I work as a data scientist. So it's sort of massaging things towards the future. And I tend to write very new fiction, sort of very, very 2030s, 2040s kind of stuff. So what I'm here to do is sort of introduce to you what we've been doing and what we've been up to, because you've seen the posts, you've seen stuff on Twitter about this, there's a whole lot of buzz. So I'm going to show you a few slides and kind of talk you through what's happened here. No fair warning, I'm good at writing stuff, but I suck at slides. So I'm just trying to lower your expectations here. The rest of the event will go fantastically. My part, however, will be truly potato stuff. So I'm just lowering your expectations here. With that said, I'm going to start sharing my screen. When you can see it, I'd like everyone to be able to see it. So please drop a message in chat once it starts displaying for you. You should see a bunch of like Google Slides going up. Yeah, all right, fantastic. So welcome to Witness. In true slap bang fashion, you know, the last edit was 45 minutes ago. This was literally just made now. So what we are seeing here is something about the project, something about the process. And the first image there is basically us talking about, can we build an honor society where we have probability theory and the sort of thinking about risk mitigation built into the religion itself, and what sort of world might that generate? And that's kind of the conversations that's really been happening with the world building team that Nadia just introduced. So let me show you where this started. Now, this started as you don't need to read all the text. Again, I'm just putting text there because, like I said, I'm bad at slides, right? I have to fill the screen. So this started out as a project called Extremistan, this idea of a floating city that could potentially support multiple districts where each district had its own unique social contract. And the idea was that the core of these things are systems we've seen before, systems for where the economic theory is very well established. We know, for example, what a hyper-capitalist or very hierarchian world might look like, very unregulated. We know what the economics of Byzantine sort of church-style worker units might look like, and this is Alberto's expertise very particularly comes in here. So around this would be the experiments, and people would constantly be allowed to boot up new cities and bring in new ideas and see what clashes also happen with these existing, because we're representing sort of existing modes of thought and truly radical changes happening at the edge, and then the process of bringing these ideas to the center. So we put this up as a concept note and it started morphing. And in fact, on the forums, sort of on the back end, is now mutating into essentially a wiki. That's what this thing is going to be presented as, a wiki that contains the history of this fictional island.
Shuda, could you make that full screen? Then people can see that better.
Oh, sure. Sorry, my Google Slides is not being very friendly with me. However, let me hit that. Okay, fantastic. So as you can see, it's now morphing into something. There are hints of architecture. There are hints of histories there. There's books being written that are entirely fictional that describe sort of this meta narrative of this history itself. And it starts out now as a it's an experiment in T.M. Scanlon's contractualism that then goes wrong. And then set afloat, it begins to partition itself into these future societies. And there are some ground rules. The ground rules are that, of course, the floating city can exist. Now, if this was very hard science fiction, I'd be laughing at this, but we can adjust the scale of hardness to see better, to prioritize some ideas or the other, because in this construct, it's not really important for us to know whether something this large can float properly. But it is important to say things like this system is isolated from the rest of the world. It's important to say things like this system has all the energy needs. Some of these have all the energy that they need. And so what kind of societies can be constructed on top of that? And so this is now evolving. So because of how the collaborative nature of this is on the back end, we've had people coming in with all sorts of incredible ideas. So for example, we have potentially a one grid coming in here, very solar punk future, and that's now been woven into the history. And if that does come in, I'm very excited for this. If that does come in, that becomes a historical event and actually gets reflected in this rather fictional history that we're talking about. There's conversations about how might the economics, as Nadia said, science fiction could use more robust economic thinking. So there's conversations about how might economics work in areas where nobody is going to enforce contracts, and how have they historically worked? How has trade worked? How would people function in a reputation-driven society? And there's, for example, Joriam coming in and saying, well, can we rearrange the structure of this? Can we have energy generation in the middle? Can we have other cities coming in from around and connecting potentially? And the way these cities connect would also now lead to very interesting conflicts at the boundaries. So this is turning into this mega city afloat, isolated, that constantly has an influx of new ideas coming in, represented by these new cities joining the infrastructure and going, we have a system and we think our system is right. And we can support as many systems of thinking as we want. So when do we plan to put this out? In wiki form, January 31st, 2021 is the deadline that we have set for ourselves. It's going fairly well, I would say. It's actually going faster than expected. So by January 31st, you should be able to access a wiki full of ideas and histories and this fictional society, this whole description, art, the whole 9 yards, and go, hang on a second, I've heard of this economic theory, or I've heard of this system that I don't think is represented here. And I want to see that in. And because of its open source nature, you can. And that's sort of our vision for this. But even before that, as the purpose of this call, we'd like you to get involved. So the interesting part, how do we pitch in? Well, how do you pitch in? So this is where we are off into an authorial tangent. World building is something that every science fiction and fantasy author does. Now, every person has a different process for going about it. Some people I know work on characters first, and they're completely character driven. From the characters come the world. There's people like me who prefer to have the world in place, and then we find that the characters and the conflicts are just generated by, like, I prefer to work from a very historical perspective. Once you start writing the history of things, people emerge from it. And that's a very top-down structure. How you approach this is up to you. What you approach it with, again, is up to you. And Joriam will explain this in more detail later on. Whether you want to pitch in a paragraph and say, this should be the theory in which this is run, and here's how it works, end of. Or whether you wanted to write an entirely new district or write an entirely new history of what this might look like, that's up to you. But here's what we're looking for. First, ask yourself, what is the truth of this world, and what choices have led you to the point where you're staring at a meme of a cat on a screen? I'm not going to answer that second question. But the truth, what I mean by the truth of the world, well, two cats. What I mean by the truth of the world is, when you think of contributing, when you're thinking about the kind of societies that you want to see here, think about the defining characteristic of your world. Think about what makes it special. Think about what truly stands out. I'll give you an anecdote. Now, I live in Sri Lanka, right? So we have free and universal education. We have free and universal healthcare. And this is like a stand, like we would not think of going, hey, let's take away healthcare from people. So for me, for the first time I went to the US, for example, landed there, and then I realized the cost of healthcare. And for me, that was this massive shock. And that was like the defining characteristic of that particular country for me, that these systems are in place where if you're at a particular socioeconomic level or below, you're basically going to get scalped. So think about what the truth of your world is. And that comes from your perspective. That comes from your experiences. Then let's break this down a little bit more. This is what we call the cultural iceberg. But once you established what you want to say, for example, we are building a Star Trek like, we want to envision a Star Trek like society where resources are not a problem. You can have all the food you want. However, all of human society now seems to run around reputation. There's an infinite amount of snacks from the thing that basically gives you water and stuff, but there is a limited number of captain's chairs. So reputation is the new currency here. Now, once you've established that, think about how this world presents itself. So we have this concept called the cultural iceberg. This is something that a lot of authors use, particularly those involved in epic fantasy, some branches of space opera and science fiction, where one of the defining characteristics is rich and detailed societies that people can then cosplay and really get themselves into. At the top, say an iceberg, most of the mass of the iceberg is just underneath. Right at the top are the things that the reader interacts with. Food, flags, festival, and fashion, and holidays, and literature, and language, and so on. Underneath that, supporting it, are the rules and the systems that this world is built on. So concepts of self and past, and what justice means, what fairness means in a different world. Attitudes towards elders and adolescents, and towards death, possibly. What does courtesy look like? What does manners look like? How do people handle personal space? Currency, economics, again, what does this look like? So what we are doing with Witness, for Project Witness, is we're building the bottom of that iceberg through the lens of through the medium of these wikis that then people can dive into and get in. What we'd like you to do is, once you've established the truth of your world, think about the bottom of the iceberg, because these are things that you can communicate. These are things that you can share with someone else and write down and spark imagination. So this is what we're looking for. So this is an open invitation. While we have some stuff in the background cooking, what we really like to do is elicit your ideas on what a utopia, for floating utopia city, which can be whatever it wants to be for you. What does that look like in detail? So, well, we will now we'll actually now be moving on to an activity that simulates this in small detail. Joriam will take point on that. Thank you. And yes, this is an image of a cat, of a unicorn, the rainbow behind it. You had to suffer through. Thank you.
Joriam, just a point. Do we want to do the video first or after?
After. It's all good. Right. I'm on it. All right, folks. So I'm a writer myself, but I also happen to be a network specialist. And for me, there's nothing as important as the critical mass that we have here in this room. All of you here are here for the same reason. There was an invitation, you got it, and you decided to dedicate your time to be here together. This is powerful. This is what we need to build all those worlds and to build a better humankind in the future. So I would like you to get to know you. This is not you folks talking to this team. It's more important than anything that you get to know each other. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a prompt, a question, and then I'm going to send you in a couple of rooms. Those rooms, different from the main room, will not be recorded. And I will invite you to have a conversation. So a brief introduction tell your name, where you're calling from. Then maybe you want to take a couple of seconds just to, open your mind's eye, open your imagination, and then you will have over 12 minutes, a little over 12 minutes to talk about it, to discuss this question I'm going to give you. And I'm going to paste it on the chat right now, but we're also going to send to you when you're in your breakout rooms. What alternative currencies or currency rules you think should be experimented? And I invite you to think of the origins of currency. There was somebody with a treasure in a big box, and they gave people a piece of paper that would represent that treasure. It was a physical thing being represented. And now we live in an age of cryptocurrencies that have changed the way people think of currencies, and even DAOs are experimenting with currencies that are purely about social capital. We are living in a moment where you can propose a different currency, and you have thousands of people who can get on board with that. So with that possibility, with that power in hand, what should we be thinking about? What should be the basis of a new interesting currency that can lead us to somewhere we've never been before? And with that, we're going to send you for a little talk, and you will be automatically teleported back here after a little while. Are we good?
Woo, woo, woo.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a lovely conversation. And a reminder, that was just a taster. You just got to know a few people out of this huge group, and just for a few minutes. So if you had one interesting idea, one interesting interaction, if you connected even on a minimal level, this is just the teaser of the taster of what this project can be. And just a small reminder, the conversations that you had right now, they don't need to stay in a vacuum. We will have a place for you, if you want to, if you feel like you had an interesting conversation, to write down those ideas and share with the rest of the group. But yeah, let's carry on with our program. And the last thing that I want to do here is invite you to interact, is to give you an idea, a map on what are the iterations they could start today, tomorrow, to get to know the people around here and to contribute to this pool of ideas that we're creating. But to introduce this work, we actually created a video for you folks, which is also a tool for you to introduce other people that might be interested in the project. It's a very condensed way to show all of the information. So I would like to premiere this video here with you. And I am sorry, because every time that the video is shared on the screen sharing thing, there's a little bit of a lag on the imagery. So excuse me, sorry, if you watch it on YouTube, it won't have the lag. But it's nice that if we can all watch together. After that, I'll let you know how you do to interact, and we'll have a little Q&A session after that. So Maria, mind sharing the video with us? Cool.
We would like to remind our passengers that in the next district, reputation cannot be turned into currency. I repeat, social reputation cannot be turned into currency.
But Mom, you were a teacher last month. Why are you a revolutionary now?
We're all revolutionaries at some point, honey. That includes you.
The Conclave has released the Human-to-Human Interaction Protocol version 3.1.56. All abbots and abbesses are required to update processes at once in order to preserve the smooth running of our work and prayer.
We can all agree we want a better life, a better future, a better humanity. And you might have your own flavor for that. You might really believe in sustainability, or freedom, or justice. But be honest with me. How many minutes, how many hours of your life have you already spent imagining this future? How will your descendants behave? How will they look like? What's the technology gonna be like? How are the feelings gonna be like in the future? Do you think the amount of time you spend in your life corresponds to the importance that you give to creating this better future for yourself and for humanity? And if not, and if we fail collectively as a species to imagine those futures, to project those futures, how the hell are we supposed to create futures we enjoy, futures we agree with, if we're not even spending the time to think about them, you know? The basics.
When I was 16, I decided I wanted to be an economist. Economics, it seemed to me, was the place where you could learn to understand our collective behavior and make our society better. Our well-being depends on this massively complex emergent system that we are all part of. We call it the economy, and we can understand it and redesign it, make it better. I became disillusioned when, at the end of the 20th century, academia threw in the towel and doubled down on defending some kind of orthodoxy that never worked that well in theory and had just the right amount of tweaks so that you could stumble on in practice. Economics can and must do better. We must offer models that people are inspired to be a part of.
But many times our imaginations, they struggle with things as big and as complex as full economies. How to reinvent something so intricate? And we're also surrounded by this economy, right? Surrounded by those rules, those assets, those values. We would really benefit from a place where we could dream big, dream wild. Luckily, we already have that space. A space where thinkers from all around the world have been projecting future societies that look vastly different from our own. It's called science fiction. Sci-fi is a framework that allows us to witness, to observe what's not yet there, what could be.
Perhaps not observe, but to extrapolate, to take an idea and to stretch it to its logical limits, and possibly even weirder, because real life, truth is far often more absurd and stranger than fiction could ever be. So to push that boundary and to see what characters and things happen, and to come back and say, well, this might be something that happens. This might be how people react. This might be stories that form, that narratives that emerge. And this is one of the things I've always found fascinating about science fiction.
A few years back, I boarded the pirate ship of Edgeryders. Together we dreamed up the Science Fiction Economics Lab, meant as a place where we can do 21st century economics with the same freedom of mind enjoyed by economists in the 17th and 18th century. And that turns out to entail a certain amount of utopianism.
So let's talk a little bit about what we're trying to do here. Among my friends, particularly those who write fantasy, there's talk of this iceberg theory of world building. And the idea is that an iceberg is something that you see a little bit of on top of the water. The reader sees that. And beneath it is a whole other mass that supports that top, that supports the story, your main character in a market passing two strangers. That is the top of the iceberg. And below that lies economic systems, currency, the language that these two speak, this trading language, the lives of those people who are trading, and the lives of markets like this. What we're trying to do here is create the base of an iceberg like that. And we're trying to create it in two ways. It has to have two objectives. The first is that anyone can take that base, and build an iceberg on top, and tell a story, and explore systems that are in here. And the second is anyone can keep adding to that base. Because what we want to do is no fictional world is perfectly realized. And what we want to do is create a base that others can also contribute to.
That's the basic idea, but how does it translate into action? What are the next steps and how can you plug in? But the first steps already happened. The Worldbuilding Academy formed a core team, and this core team is working hard to create an open source world and a platform where people can interact and expand this world. The idea is that both in a narrative sense and also in a platform sense, we want to create a world that's extensible, modular, and we even want to add gaps on purpose because we don't want to create this world on our own. We just want to have enough structure so that all sorts of people can interact with this work. So if you want to help us expand this world building and create your own vision, that's cool, we'll have a space for you. But if you only want to write a short story based on that world, you're also invited. And if you're an architect and you're just interested in the architectural aspect of this world, we got your back too. The nature of this work is open source, so please help us create something amazing that we can offer for free. Let's foster those conversations. Let's create those imaginations. There's already a couple of invitations for collaboration in the description below, but next year we're planning on an engagement campaign proper. We're thinking things like invitations for particular collaborations. We want to invite professionals to our group. Imagine if writers could collaborate with chefs to figure out the gastronomy of a particular place. That would be amazing. We're thinking maybe short story competitions, maybe monthly calls. We're not sure yet. We want a temperature check with our community, see what the community responds to, and then focus those actions there. The most crucial aspect of this work is community building and collaboration. So if you personally agree that those imagination exercises are vital, are so important, then join us in the Edgeryders platform. The link will be in the description of this video. And engage with the prompts we leave there, with the people around, propose your own things. These are your peers, people who care about things that you also care about. Find them, engage, and let's together build new economies, new societies, a new humankind. Dear passengers, in a few minutes, your blood samples will be collected by our train crew. As per usual, you will be assigned an amount of currency based on your viral immunity and the usefulness of your genetic material. We wish you a pleasant journey.
Arm, please. Ow. Thank you. Arm, please. Thank you. Appendage, please. Thank you. Arm, please. Thank you.
All right. So that was our main introduction. You're the first people to see this video. We created for the rest of the world, for you who are already engaged to share with the rest of the world. So it's a pleasure for me to show it for the first time. As I mentioned in the video, there's a couple of interactions that are already fast-tracked. We created a little map that Maria is going to share with you in the chat right now. So if you could just leave the chat for like 2 minutes with anything else, so just everybody can click on that link, that would be nice. And you will see that there's already like a list of things for you to interact. We put a couple of prompts on the Edgeryders platform for you to not only interact with a couple of prompts for stories, but also with a couple of prompts on how would you like to interact with this community on a meta level. Would you like to interact on calls or competitions and so on and so on. So this is my first invitation for you, and just know that this is the beginning. The true structure of this work starts in 2021. We just want to not lose this incredible opportunity, which is to have all of you here interested in the same room. But anyway, here we are. This is our map, and I would like to open a Q&A section just in case anybody has any doubts. I know we only have 5 minutes. We're a bit late in our time, I'm sorry, but I can also offer for anybody who has a little extra time for us to stay a couple of minutes more after our regular scheduled time. And of course, this recording will be shared afterwards in case you absolutely must go. All right, so I think Maria was already capturing a couple of questions.
Yes, so I think the first question came already in from Wismay, about the constraints and boundaries of this world.
Right. Let's see. We have the conceit of a city. We have a conceit of a floating city that has a sort of history behind it. And the history is deliberately sort of structured so that at some point it just starts splitting, and that's where others can plug in. And we have the concept of, I think particularly what you saw in the video, this idea of the migrant train and the idea of a single central system that constantly uses behavioral big data to monitor people's, to monitor people's changes in social contracts, to monitor people's morals and attitudes towards certain topics. And whenever someone doesn't seem to fit, right, and they're given the option of taking the migrant train to a district that is more in alignment with what they expect from the world. And in some parts, in some cities that we're coming up with, this is completely disabled. You go there, and after that, you're responsible for walking out. So that's pretty much the constraints. There's a history. There's a history being built of the other districts as well. Beyond that, anything can come in. General aesthetic constraints, of course, human-centric, human interaction, cyborgs, yes. Dragons and dragons and aliens landing, possibly no. It's meant to sort of be anchored to a future where many of the problems that we have today have been exacerbated. And for example, climate change, infrastructure, uneven distribution of infrastructures, all these things have impacted the world. And this massive mega city is really a response to some of these problems. And that's the sort of aesthetic context in which this is placed.
Thank you. I think it fits well to follow this up with the question that was raised very early by Johannes, but also seconded by Zoe, about can we try multiple scenarios, or are we building one world?
I can jump in on that.
Yeah.
We are building one city. We want to have something concrete for the people who are not interested in building the base of our iceberg. But nothing stops anybody from building other cities, from building other structures that are not cities in this world. We just want to make sure that there is enough there for all sorts of audiences. So one city we're definitely going to build. But
yeah, so think about, I think there's a really good question about goals and time plans and milestones and so on, which nicely ties into this. The core team, that's me, Joriam, Nadia, Ivan, Alberto, pretty much everyone that you see here. Our goal is to set up this core. We've got a few districts that we had in mind. We've brainstormed over this. We've taken some features out. We put some features in, and we've gone, okay, this and this seems interesting enough that we can plonk it down there. We're building this, and the structure is so that you can have anything, any other city coming in, and if you can imagine it, you can have it plugging into the infrastructure, the fictional infrastructure that we've got going on there. For example, one of the most recent contributors to this project, which was sort of tentatively, is a separate city project that another team, Hugo was there. Hugo is also the one who wrote this. It's a city called Avantgrid. Am I pronouncing it right? It's a beautiful sort of ho-punk / solo punk world.
Yeah, and Ulle, who is on that project, actually is also on the call. So
yeah. So I mean, I saw that. I mean, okay, I actually started collecting reference art for that. So hopefully that city plugs in to this infrastructure, and that becomes a historical event. We've actually got that earmarked down in the history, and this city exists. And now potentially it can start having interactions with other cities. Maybe they don't like each other. Maybe they have massive problems. Maybe they don't want the migrant train coming in. All these things are.
Great, thank you.
So
I think Alberto wanted to add something directly to the constraints question, and then I would move to the next question.
Right. So I would say an interesting constraint here is consistency, is logical consistency, in the sense that we are imagining this architecture, open architecture of districts and sub-districts and all that. And so in theory, you can imagine anything you want, but in practice, they will be standing next to each other and so they have to, you have to imagine a sort of equilibrium in which they would exist with the other districts. And this mirrors closely a problem that we have in the real world, namely that if you want to build a different economic system, you have to build it in the present economic system. And if the system that you want to build is incompatible with the current one, it will die and it will never happen. So those of us who are into imagining widely different arrangements for our societies and economies, we all need to solve two problems at once, not just one. We need to design a system that works and that we like, and it needs to be able to go from here to there.
Yeah,
See?
yeah. And I think one of the interesting components there is it is best, it is strongest if there is solid economic underpinnings to this, and that's critical. For example, we all have utopias and love to write a utopia where everything is perfect and so on and so forth. However, at some point we have to look at it and go, could this system plausibly work? If we are replacing currency with a system built on reputation, for example, which is actually an ongoing conversation that we're having on the back end, how would this work? And how has this worked before? Do we have any references? Can we imagine a reasonably concrete structure that you flesh it out with a few characters and you go, okay, these people do seem to be able to interact with each other. Can we do that? If that can be met, absolutely.
Okay, thank
so
you very
I
much.
just wanted to just clarify one thing. A lot of the questions are about essentially the same thing. How much is open-ended and how much is already going to be structured? And that's the sort of clever thing of the setup, that we're imagining one city, which is a single city with a few districts that we really flesh out. And then there will essentially be a lot of opportunity through these mechanisms that will be explained more when the wiki comes out in January, for you to come in and form your own district. And through the mechanisms that are sort of explained within how this world works, you'll see that it's you're not very constrained in how you do that, but you will have some constraints. So the answer is sort of both and. It is very open-ended, but it also does have clear boundaries around it.
Thank you for clarifying that, Hugi. Then you addressed like some of these questions that have been accumulating now, I think, with those issues of what can be added and such. Maybe can you say one more thing about like the open end or the clear, like the end of the project? Is there a clear end of the project?
Maybe Alberto can, because there's a question here about what's the ultimate goal. Alberto, do you want to take a little bit on that with the economy side?
Sure. So the declared goal is to have this kind of wiki, which I don't imagine will ever be finished. It's like the Marvel wiki or the Star Trek wiki or the Star Wars wiki. You can always like add another edit and add some more nuance and imagine some other thing and imagine a cool building that somebody's built in the middle of the district or not. The real goal, however, is to expand our ability to think about different economic system, and the real goal is to put some of this ability into the hands of the people who are running the green transition. The green transition is a thing. I think we are, as a civilization, underestimating the amount of mess that it will cause, starting in Europe immediately, because a lot of public money is flowing down pipelines that were not built for that much money. So the pipelines will rupture and a lot of mess will happen. So the mess will be mostly bad, but it will also contain some opportunities in which new seeds could grow. And so if we could, in theory, put some interesting ideas in the field of vision of the people that are trying to make the green transition happen, well, then we might have some surprises. I have some of my pet ideas for that. But the important thing is that this is an art project that, however, does an ambition to feed into a more of a kind of policy, participatory policy project.
Thank you, Alberto.
Just to add to that, if you will think of this as a vector for ideas, like if you look at concepts that we today take for granted, a lot of them originated in science fiction. Science fiction has often not been a very good predictive tool. It's been an inspiration for people who then went on to do those things. For example, the Apple engineer behind iTunes, quite often being quoted saying he cribbed that idea from Star Trek. Likewise, credit cards. Edward Bellamy, a writer in the 1820s, wrote of this future where people used little strips of metal in large stores that contained everything, and they would just swipe it. And if you look at smartphones, Clark in the 70s. So these things are not necessarily predictive works of fiction, but people have looked at that. Product engineers at some point have looked at these ideas and gone, okay, let's take that. So think of it as a vector for injecting ideas. It may work, it may not, but.
Thank you very much. Then would it be correct to say that ideas should in some way be based in a plausible economic theory? So that needs to be involved in every idea that is added to this? And does that in what and connected to that, like what determines if an economical system is feasible? Does it need to be connected to a real living world? Does it rule out some systems? There was one question if socialism is therefore not possible. Yeah, Alberto maybe, or
Alberto?
Answer no, absolutely not. I mean, okay, economics is a bit of a mess in the sense that we now tend to think there is economics, and that would be neoclassical economics, the standard model and all that. So we are definitely, we don't need to imagine a world based on that. I mean, you're looking at it. It's kind of, there's nothing much to be gained. However, economics has a long history. So the Wealth of Nations, 1780, and before that, you know, the physiocrats were already active in the 16th century, actually. So, sorry, in the 1600s, in the 17th century. So you've got an array of models and schemes that you can deploy, and you can absolutely build more. The important thing, I would say, is this consistency that I already spoke about. So one, that treat our ideas with a reasonable intellectual integrity, not just try to pull things out of the air just because they look cool. I mean, we do that too, but then we shoot it down and we kind of trim it to a point where it feels alive. You know, I think narrative, like Yuda says, is powerful in the sense, because if the world feels cartoonish, as in much utopian literature in the 50s, for example, or 60s, well, then it will be bad literature. It's very difficult to imagine a captivating story in a world that feels fake. And so our world should feel real. And for that, I think the iceberg, the famous, you know, iceberg, the part of the iceberg is underwater that you were talking about. Well, there needs to be some economic thinking. But on the other hand, economics is now also completely exploding in many different directions, because the biologists moved in, the physicists moved in, the network scientists moved in, and now you are in a place where basically the orthodoxy is kind of cornered, in fact. I predict there will be no orthodoxy in 30, 40 years. It will be completely blown away. And so you can also look, you know, follow these guys, follow Taleb, follow Ole Peters, follow the cultural evolution theory guys. You know, there's so much interesting science that is, in sense, economics, because it's about allocation of resources in human societies. It doesn't come from the economics department, but we don't care about that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, as an author, I mean, I've been writing professionally for quite a while. Often I read books that are coming out that are like, oh, hey, thinking about the future and so on. I'll read them and go, this is the exact same stuff we saw in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, because generally people agree on what a nice world would look like. I actually carried out this experiment by looking for the word utopia on Twitter and downloading 70,000 tweets and classifying them by the kind of worldviews that they represented. This is a project that we did with Lanesha for lols. And one of the things we found out is everybody agrees that people should, at the bottom of the letter, people should have equivalent starting points. People should have access to all these good things. So generally, the writing done without this kind of serious thought behind it tends to inevitably converge on the same. However, if we look at what's happening in economics, as Alberto said, not necessarily in classical, very neoliberal economics, but at the edges, the boundaries, even coming from literature, it's absolutely fantastic to see like linguistic analysis going on. You see all these strange and interesting new ideas that you can take and grab and actually construct a world around.
Thank you. I just want to throw in here that also all kinds of interesting forms in which you want to contribute are very welcome, including LARPing and things like that, which was something that was put up in the chat. And then there is like a lively discussion there ongoing about this, how much something needs to be grounded in political realities, if you have to have like a narrative explaining how you got from where we are to there, and also a little vote going on with something that Zoe brought up, that speaking as an economist, that we should not be limited to existing theories, but open to new ones. Do you want to react to that?
I'm basically raising my hand and saying, hell yeah.
I think an important, I'd like to read that comment because it got so many plus ones. So he's saying, I don't think it should be limited by existing theories. I say this as an economist, but should be limited by things like incentive compatibility and our understanding of human behavior. And I think that's pretty clear and concise in what we're trying to do here.
That's actually a more concise explanation than what we just gave.
Mm-hmm.
So,
if you think of the economy, the way the economy looked in 1720, nowadays economy would look extremely sci-fi. Just the existence of the internet as a technology, it would look like some crazy talk, but the human behaviors, the resources on this planet, they're essentially the same. So this is more or less the sort of flavor that we're trying to capture here.
So people are starting to drop off, and it is 12 minutes over time. So of course, this is a time when anyone can leave. Maria, you've posted the form to people, right? And that's also coming by email.
So I'm sending the form for your feedback from the for your ideas from the breakout room right now. And then I'm also reposting a link to a table of content for the now existing posts and things in the world already, to which you can contribute and how to which.
And will everyone also get this by email? These links to the forum and the posts.
Yeah.
Great.
Wonderful.
Fantastic.
Thanks everybody for showing up. That was a lovely session.
Yeah, thank you so much.